cost of acquisition, there are tangible and intangible costs associated with cost of acquisition. And it's great today that we've got two panelists, one from, for want of a better term, from a revenue background and one from a sort of a digital marketing background. So we can really kind of explore those areas. So I guess starting with yourself, when you look at cost of acquisition, what costs do you consider and how easy is it to obtain that accurate data?
Right, so when we look at cost of acquisition, we look at everything that you actually spend to get the business in. So that could be direct costs associated with the transaction. So that's sort of like your commissions, your booking, GDS pass-through fees, etc., etc. So that's the first part. And then there's the second part, which you cannot directly attribute to a transaction, but that's sort of your sales and marketing, perhaps payroll, any campaigns that perhaps you cannot map. So you have that sort of total holistic view of your costs. And that's really important to put everything in there, not just look at commissions, because that budget is sort of a finite budget. It doesn't go exponentially as we know. So it's really sort of assigning where do you actually want to spend the money. So it's really everything to acquire the business.
So looking at sales and marketing costs or more transactional kind of related costs?
It's both.
It's both.
It's both, exactly. And you want to make that distinction so that you know what is transaction based and what is sort of your, let's say, annual sale costs. And you want to sort of bundle that all together so you can have everything.
Okay. And how difficult is it to get to that accurate data? Because we just chatted before we started this session. So revenue managers' budgets are top line driven. They're measured on revenue performance on a monthly basis. They generally don't have a KPI which is looking at cost of acquisition. So if they've got a budget shortfall 5-6 days out at the end of the month, it's in their interest to increase commission levels with the OTAs, for instance, to drive the revenues in without any regard really for the cost of acquisition. And because that kind of activity is tactical and not contracted, how easy is it to get that transparency of that tactical play on commission levels?
Right, so there's two things, right? So if you look at all the costs, the challenge that you have as a hotel is that they're all spread in the P&L in different areas. You have sales and marketing, then you have commissions that are sitting in your room expenses. So all of that is split in the P&L. So that's sort of the complexity that you get. Now, there's two things that you want to do. Is that first, you want to see things from a strategic point of view and sort of bundling them all together and taking, let's say, a budget all your costs for the next year and saying, here's how we want to spend our money. So that's sort of the strategic one. And then the more tactical one is how do you spend, let's say, commission overrides, your marketing campaigns, sort of what your revenue manager would do with your digital guy, like sort of on next week, next day, forward looking. So
that's Martin's.
Digital
that's Martin's,
guy.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's always that discussion with sort of revenue looking at sales and marketing and saying, what is this campaign really bringing me? And, usually revenue managers just see the cost of it, but they don't see the sort of, what the uplift was in business. So you want to bridge these two worlds and you want these people to actually have common KPIs in how do they look at the data and what decisions they take.
I have a question on that. I just recently did a marketing campaign for a hotel. And one of the main things we saw is organic search was declining over 2 years. So we focused a pretty big marketing budget just on brand awareness. We were not interested necessarily, if we got transaction, it was great, but what we wanted was brand awareness. We used all the social channels, just create brand awareness, images, and no special offers, nothing. Just create brand awareness and lift organic search as the measure of brand awareness. So it's the best KPI for organic for brand awareness is organic search. And we did. Organic search went up. Great, this is what we wanted to achieve. Except how would you classify that budget we spent? Because that became then the discussion is that, well, we're spending a lot of money, yes, but we're solving strategic issues of lack of brand awareness. How would you split that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question actually. So depending where you are with your sort of hotel life cycle, if you're launching a new hotel, not everything will give you the ROI that you're looking for. So the key, I think, is to know what that number is. So if you're spending, I don't know, 200K on campaigns or whatever, you need to know that down the road, maybe in 3, 6 months, 9 months, here's what I'm gonna get back. And in the short term, it's not gonna be net revenue that's gonna be the driver, but it's gonna be, yeah, as you said, your traffic or whatever. So you need to know what that number is, and then you take the appropriate decisions.
Okay.
But that's the intangible element, isn't it? So it's you know, is it realistic to load your cost of acquisitions with absolutely every element within the organisation? So in terms of brand building, so your sales and marketing. So if it's an SEO or PPC, it's tangible. We can understand that. We can link that to activity. But in your regard, Martin, when you're saying you're doing a brand awareness to increase organic search, is that something that should even be included in cost of acquisition? I mean, is that's a sum of money that sits in a strategic fund under marketing that shouldn't touch transaction-based costing?
Well, I mean, I'm a data guy, so so I'd say that you sort of need to measure everything that you spend. And today, with sort of the digital environment, you can measure much more than you could in the past. But again, it comes to, you know, if you spend something on brand awareness, which you definitely should, it's money that you cannot maybe spend somewhere else. Or whatever you do, it's sort of, as I said, your budget is not infinite. So, you know, if you have $500,000 to spend as a whole, you need to spend it where your best ROI is. So you need to, that's why I'll come back to that, and I'm sort of very strict on that, of saying you really need to take everything. Otherwise, you know, it's like becomes this blurred picture of, yeah, but this is really about brand building, and then sort of you get discussions that lead nowhere. So I'd really say we need to really look at everything.
Well, it was interesting this morning, wasn't it, when Fernando was at the opening plenary session, and he talked about the open corporate rates, so this flexible commission levels, which I thought was quite interesting. So again, as our business is becoming more dynamic, it's less and less easy to get to that figure of that transaction cost me X, the cost of acquisition was X, because you've got all of this flexing. And I guess the question I'm asking is our business becoming so dynamic and so automated that actually it's becoming less easy to capture those real-time costs, those dealing costs that a property undertakes?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's certainly challenging to capture these costs, but it's not impossible to get there. So I mean, today with sort of the digital landscape, you know, every transaction you can get all the costs. You can also get all the metadata attracted, let's say, connected to that transaction. So you can easily map it, whether it's for the past or whether it's for the future. You can't allocate everything just yet, but you need to take that first step of getting on with it, getting these numbers to speak to you in terms of net revenue and how much you're spending. And the more we advance in time, the more precise you are going to get. But like we have hotels that have like 30% acquisition costs, and you know, you can't just say, well, actually I can't get 100% to it, so I'm just gonna wait and see what happens. When you have acquisition cost of 30%, you need to take action. And even if you do 80% of what you're gonna do, it's probably gonna get you a better result.
One of the other interesting slides I thought was when he brought up his cost by channel. So he had that brand.com versus OTA versus other channels, and the costs were kind of in line. We laugh about the panel here last year where David Turnbull made his statement that if he was opening a hotel, I don't know if Kevin Mayer's here this year, but anyway, if you're opening a hotel, then he would potentially look at, you know, outsourcing his distribution to OTAs, because the cost of driving it direct is actually higher than we think, or higher than we actually record. So I guess, Martin, so, you know, you're driving brand.com, there's a lot of investment in driving that direct. In your view, is direct still best?
I'm not sure I would say direct is best. I think the perfect mix for me is you have 3/3, and you'll have a third direct, a third OTAs, and a third something else. Nobody really has that, but then you're sure you don't have everything in one place. I mean, I've also dealt with hotels where we've had sort of 70% direct, and it was great, except all it took was the website to be down for a day.
Yeah, sure.
And that was that.
Yeah.
And we're like, then there we regretted that we didn't have OTAs and other channels. I used to work at an agency. We launched a few hotels, and every hotel launch we did, we put majority on OTAs. We had a lower rate on OTAs than direct to manage to boost our ranking on OTAs to get brand awareness and visibility, because it's way cheaper than doing a Facebook or Instagram or other campaign that's going to create brand awareness, and you can only get that much media unless you're an incredibly special hotel. You'll only get that much media. So OTAs were the best way to get the hotel off the ground. That's not to say direct is not best, because we were selling direct. I believe direct is really good, and you need to have a really good share of direct, but this sort of pipe dream of getting everyone into 100% direct or direct is best. Direct is best for me is utopic. Be more direct or optimizing direct is great. The average hotel has 10% direct. There is room for improvement. That's true.
Yeah.
There is definitely room for improvement. It doesn't mean that's all you should be doing and you should be on a big battle with everyone else. It's a great media story to have a battle against OTAs.
Yeah,
it really
sure.
works great in the media, and it's a great sort of David and Goliath story, and that's why it works. That's why the media pick up on it. That's why the agencies that are pushing direct. We were doing that. When we ran an agency, we were pushing direct, and you got to fight against the OTAs, and it's the good war, and we knew it was just.
Yeah,
it worked well. It's a great story.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's better that I recently took over the management or the marketing of a hotel, and the biggest outcome was they're doing too much direct, and it's not enough OTAs.
Oh, really?
And
Why that?
Because the top line there was room for improvement on the top line.
Right.
And when you look at the occupancy and the competitors, they say, well, we can increase, and the website compared to other hotels of that side were doing really good. And so where you're not doing really good is OTAs. Let's go boost OTAs. Yes, now they're complaining that the OTAs are doing too much. I say, well, that was the idea. Now we got to readjust, but it doesn't.
Yes.
Now you increase the top line, and so don't go only on this one thing.
And so I know a lot of hotels have a strategy whereby we're not allowed to talk about rate parity, but I can because I'm not with the brand and I'm completely neutral. But whereby the same rates had to be offered on all the different channels, and then some hotel groups now, or independent hotels now, offer a discounted rate on their own website to hopefully drive direct and don't display that rate on the OTAs. Do you think that's a good strategy on the basis that your direct business is probably costing you just as much as an OTA? Is that undermining the brand, or?
I think the rate parity is not good for the consumer. I think rate parity is not good for the guests. They want choice. They want to be able to look at different places. And if we just have rate parity, it's just boring. Like, the guests don't have any other channel or something they can find something better. So I think it's good that we have flexibility. Then it's a question of profitability. And that's where, if your direct actually has so many hidden costs, such as massive brand awareness campaigns or massive press,
Meta or
other costs that you have that you don't really associate to direct, and then you start taking down the direct price and thinking you're making more profit, that's a bad idea. But that's where you need to measure it. And I think, for me, the biggest problem is most people don't measure.
Yeah.
And on many, many fronts.
Well, let's do a poll here then of the people in the room that are responsible for revenue, either GM or revenue manager positions. How many of you are actively tracking your cost of distribution or your cost of acquisition? Alexander? Yeah.
2, 3,
We have been
4.
doing that actually for quite some time, and direct is best work when you can keep your cost of distribution below the commission levels from
The OTAs.
an online travel agency. So we find that in some case, online travel agents have the higher profitability. So for us, it's not just direct versus OTAs. For us, it's the net ADR
Yeah.
and such straight away all the cost, but all the cost.
Exactly.
Yes.
Including the marketing guy and the digital and his salary and everything that comes with it. And the brand association, because, you know, mostly for small hotels, small independent hotels, that cost, that bucket of money for brand awareness is so limited that,
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest shout for us is Booking.com Expedia. So if I can push an higher ADR there, why would I bother? So the marketing guy and I are fighting quite a bit.
Why doesn't that surprise me? This is from Nadler Hotels, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, it's very easy to get confused and sidetracked because once you start adding all that costs, and we install widgets on our websites, and we spend on acquisition in pay-per-click, and we build fantastic websites, etc. And you add all this up, often it costs you more than the OTAs. And the book direct sort of war on OTAs. It's something that has been invented by the big brands because they can go to the owners and say, we bring business and don't go with having independent hotels. So we shouldn't fall in the game of saying, let's generalize everything and sort of OTAs are bad or, direct is best, but it's really looking at it at a very granular level and then taking the decisions that go with it.
And it's really about taking care of the guest in the end, because your profit isn't their concern. If you made a mistake as a revenue manager and sold the room at €1, they would still claim the room. You can say, I'm losing money on that. Say, hey, that's not really my problem. I booked the room at €1. You're going to give it to me at €1. So to go off to a hotel and say, to go off to a guest and say, you should book direct because we save money. He says, well, it's not like I'm crying for the fact that hoteliers are not making money. It's not like, when you say I own a hotel, it's not like, poor you. No, it's not the way they look at you. So it really is, what is going to be best for the guest, and the danger in all of that is commoditization. The danger is your product will be commoditized, and that's something you as a hotelier need to fix, because it should be that one sees a picture of your hotel and say, okay, I know where that is. If the only thing that's different is the color of the curtains, you really have a problem. If you're not sure whether this is a Hilton or an independent or something, because, I don't know, I think Hilton was blue and IHG is green, then you really have a problem, because OTAs are going to commoditize you into just being a room. But that's more at a product level. What are you going to do to make it better so people remember you and want to come back?
And that's absolutely true, because in the data you can see that the hotels that have a very strong personality or brand, let's say, or a strong brand, independent hotels that have a story, they also have a lower acquisition cost. That we see in the data, every single time. So when you have a strong story, then it's easier for you to get the customers, and you're going to spend less. Absolutely. Yeah.
I know when I've spent time with independent hotels and hotel groups trying to understand what we used to call cost of distribution by channel, trying to measure average ADR by channel, average length of stay by channel, and then, God forbid, what was the spend or revenue generated on property as a result of those guests that came from channels, to the true net worth of those customers. Getting that information is so difficult to get, because everything goes in a bucket. So when it goes into the PMS, it's the OTA bucket. It doesn't break it out by OTAs in a lot of cases. So is one of the challenges that we have is that the level and granularity of data in our segmentation and our PMSs is just not the level that we need. Is that part of the challenges that we face when we're looking at cost of acquisition?
I mean, it's a
certainly has been
huge
for me
problem.
when I'm trying to get it if I ask the data.
We were looking at that when I was at Snapshot, at how we could sort of break that down. The problem is that every PMS still has sort of internet as a channel, which great. That's wow. That's really helpful. And then you've got FIT, and then you've got a bunch of other, and that's the way it's broken down in the PMS, and then you have channels, the actual OTAs that it came through, and so you get the segments of the channels, and it's really hard. You probably have more sort of managed to solve it. We were looking at algorithms that could work it out backwards to try and clean that up, because we're not going to change behavior of millions of people who work in hotels overnight. That's going to
Yeah.
have to, and the OTAs are pretty old. So,
Yeah.
sorry, the
PMSs
PMSs
are pretty old,
The
yeah.
PMSs are pretty old. So, I don't know how you solve that.
Yeah, so I think it's a bit utopian to think that you sort of plug a piece of software indeed and then it suddenly works and ta-da, you have your acquisition cost and then you start managing it. No, this is...
You used to have hair before you started.
yeah, that's the result of it. So yeah, it's sort of utopian to think that, but I think what you really need to spend some time is getting, let's say, your tracking properly at the first place, which hotels should be doing anyhow. And then what we do is that we capture data at the most transactional level, so we can go back in history and correct as much as possible and sort of write algorithms that are actually gonna fix and put business in specific buckets. And that gets you pretty close to what you're looking for. So, and then as from that moment, you start sort of, let's say, organizing your data, probably fixing it, etc. And it becomes this journey where you start at a low level and then down the road in sort of 1.5 years, you get super good at it and then it really starts to show in results. You're not going to fix it, let's say, in 1 month or in 2 months or something. It's a journey and you need to sort of take the organization where it is and then take that journey with everyone. And involve all departments, revenue, marketing, distribution, sales. It's not finance, obviously. They're the ones sort of moaning about it all the time. So everybody needs to be involved in having that sort of common view.
I think the other thing that I've found is when you go and do a review is that one of the companies we work with called it dealing costs. So there are these TMC agreements that you sign, so $1,000 here to be in the program. There's a kickback commission. There's water in the room when they arrive. There's potentially free Wi-Fi, room upgrade, whatever the added values are. And even from the management team perspective, it wasn't clear to them in the business what those costs were, because the sales team were off doing that piece and all they see is the production coming through the GDS for the corporate rates that are loaded, but the true dealing costs again are really difficult. We struggle with this looking at rooms. God forbid when we get to M&E and restaurants and F&B, because I don't see any traction at the moment of measuring those costs of acquisition. So, M&E is the ugly area in the business. Whenever we spend time in an organisation, M&E is the last area of the business to be touched because it's the most difficult, complex, manual area of the business. And I just wonder, is that an area where we should be looking at cost of acquisition as well, looking at our M&E space and equally F&B outlets, etc. Or does it all go in one pot?
No, I think we should, but I think what we should really think about is also what one of the panelists before said, is that you should start small and saying let's fix room cost first. Okay, so let's start with that. As soon as we got control over this, then let's move on to meeting and events. Let's move on to food and beverage. Let's look at how much we spend perhaps on loyalty, etc. And let's look at the profitability ultimately of all revenues. But you need to start with rooms before you sort of mushroom it into a mega sort of crusade to get net revenue that's going to take you forever and then it doesn't work. So start with what you can actually action.
And then build upon it there, I guess, and Fernando was saying, is that try and testing and failure is okay and learning and trying again. As you said, it's a science in a way that you need to build it over time and become more adept at collecting the information and getting the true costs.
Yeah, and often you don't need 100% of the information to take a decision. Often 85% of the information is enough for you to take an informed decision that will sort of improve your profits. And if you look at sort of improving profit via optimizing acquisition costs, often you're not looking to take your acquisition cost from 30% down to 20%. You are looking at small increments. Even a 1% sort of 1 point increase or decrease in acquisition costs for a portfolio of hotels, we're talking big numbers. And if you put it to an owner, it's quite a lot of value there. So it's small shifts that you want to do. You don't want to sort of decrease acquisition cost by 10%, and then suddenly you don't have business. You're wondering why.
Martin, I want to talk a bit about loyalty, and I know you have some opinions on this. So we touched on earlier that a lot of the brands have historically had these kind of points make prizes, loyalty programs, rewarding the customer primarily for sharing their data, so they could understand them better and to sell the benefits. I think you mentioned to the owners, but in your experience, let's talk about it from a brand perspective, I guess, rather than an independent hotel. What's your experience in terms of the cost of a loyalty program and the impact that potentially has on cost of acquisition modeling?
Well, we kind of need to first separate out the concept of loyalty, recognizing repeat guests, and rewarding and rewarding repeat guests. It's kind of three really separate things, and in the hospitality industry, we've bundled it all into one. Loyalty equals plastic card with points. There you go.
Yeah.
The cost. I mean, one thing everyone I've worked with, the first thing I do is when we get into loyalty is, okay, how much is your repeat guest rate? Nobody really knows. Does anyone here know how much? What's the rate of repeat? Okay, I'll tell you. It's about 10% per hotel. 12 if you're really good, 9 on average. That's the repeat rate of guests. So you're making a program and you're going to invest a lot of money, giving them a lot of points to 10%. That's it. That's what you're doing. You're going to give a whole package of money, investment, branding, brand awareness, cards, and all of that for 10% of the guests. 90% will not come back. Those 10% probably twice a year. So they will not even benefit much from it. So you're giving them a free loyalty program. So when you come back next time, I won't. There's 80% chance that person will not come back another time in your hotel. And so you build this whole thing. And loyalty is earned because, and that's back to creating great hotels. People love hotels. You get loyalty because you made a great hotel, because the experience was excellent. And even if they don't come back, they're loyal because they will speak about you and bring you new clients. Almost 40% of an independent hotel's revenue, direct revenue, is made from word of mouth. So if you build a great product, you will have loyal guests, meaning they will talk about it to friends and that will come back. It's not them that are going to come back, or in 80% of the case, it's not them that is coming back. And if you're coming back to the city, if it's not for work, you're probably going to check out another hotel. So it's really something which we've kind of bundled into one big mess. And then you have this cost of all this point system where every year the rules change because they're trying to shave off a bit of the cost, because the costs are too high. So every year they make the rules a bit more complex. It's a model that's essentially, in my opinion, gonna die. You have the hardcore people like George Clooney and
they do the cards. What's that film called? I can't remember.
Where that's like this life's goal is getting to 1,000,000 miles or something, or 1,000,000,000 miles. Okay, but that's like 2% of the population is up there. The rest of the people don't. I got one. I was at another Radisson yesterday, and just had to sign a paper and get a card. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll sign it just to go through the process. Let's just go through the process and see how this works. And I get a card. I left it in the room. What am I going to do with another card? I don't need another card, please. I have plenty at home. Don't give me another card. You should be able to recognize me. You should be able to see who I am based on my email if I come back and so on. I don't need a number. I gave a talk on this a few weeks ago, and someone came up to me and said, yeah, but the main thing why we do these loyalty points is that's how we recognize the guests.
Yes, can track you. Because
now we have the number. Come on, we're in 2018. We should be able to recognize people without them having to input a number. We have their email address. We have cookies on their phones. They have their phone numbers. Their phones are with them. We have, they can connect their Facebook accounts. There's so many ways we can recognize guests. We don't need them to input a number. It's like, wait, you tell me who you are again, and I will recognize you. It's like, no, you should just know who I am. It's like, if I come here 10 times, you should just know. I stayed at the same hotel for 2 months every week
And they still
straight.
don't recognise you.
The last time I stayed, they recognized me. I was like, seriously, guys, you had me fill in this passport data at least 10 times in 2 months. It doesn't work, guys. It's you know, so don't. And I have a loyalty program with you, so so it really it doesn't really work. And the costs, I mean, they're growing because you have to give away so many freebies. And you were saying you've done an analysis more on the cost level.
Yeah, we've done a lot of analysis because we obviously look at loyalty also as a cost. And again, you can see that if you take a booking through a GDS, commissioner booking, whatever, and then he's a member of loyalty program and he lands in your hotel, you've hit the jackpot. It's higher than booking.com. so again, there you want to sort of having a hard look at it and then thinking like, is this the right thing? Should I push enrolling guests or not? Well, depending the hotel, maybe it's not, because then you're sort of fighting against yourself.
Okay, so we're saying now that loyalty really is not a points make prizes. That's kind of a dated model. That it's about recognition. It's about recognizing people and making their experience whilst on property as personalized as it possibly can be. Yeah, is that
good
right?
hospitality?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what
What's
what we're in the end. That's why
Hospitality.
we exist. You know, we welcome people really well, and that's what we're good at. That's as hoteliers. That's what we should be good at. Is, you know, they come in and they're treated like royals, and they feel that way, and that's what we're good at. And the whole. We have sort of used mechanical systems to try and cope with the fact that, you know, some people are not doing such a good job. I think that's wrong.
Yeah, and again also we shouldn't sort of fall neither in the trap of sort of blanket covering everything. Depends what your hotel is. If your hotel is in a business location and the majority of your business is coming from the US, well, guess what? They love loyalty programs and they collect all these cards and they put them in their wallet and they're happy with it. If your target sort of group is, you know, young millennials and it's a dynamic hotel, etc., then forget about loyalty. Don't even bother going there. So, you know, so it shows in the numbers that loyalty costs really, really a lot, but you really need to sort of look at your data and what kind of hotel you have and what's your sort of segments you're after, and does it make sense or not? Because it can be very difficult. I'm sure there's people here that will tell me no, but for me it works, and I will believe it until I look in the data.
Thank you, Vasilis, Martin. Thank you.